wrath of the God. Which one was it? So now, then this line here really is the one that essentially encapsulates the whole notion of this reign. He said this was to heal the misery which has afflicted Adam's progeny. So what this misery is the feeling of sorrow that people have when somebody dies. That he had just come back from the cemetery and everybody around was mourning essentially. And that's that misery that really is not really clear when you read it, that is referring to that mourning that people have around. That essentially is been afflicted the entire Adam's lineage from the day one to that day. That progeny is that everybody does that.
Okay.
He says if the man to remain inside this fire, the rate of loss and ruin would soar higher. And this fire essentially is this mourning of the dead, that you don't want to let go of it.
Okay.
And he says, then later on, he says that in summary, he says that if you pay attention and you stay involved in this mourning and misery, you're going not have enough time to pay attention is what's important. The moral of the story is to let go of this misery and this mourning and pay attention to what is important so that you can essentially become a useful, valuable person and build for the day after, instead of just wasting your time in mourning for people who are dead, in a sense. And then it says that when you get to learn the spirit, when you have a spiritual awakening, when you learn the wisdom's sunshine greed, the wisdom is not really proper for him to have used this wisdom apostrophe S. He should have written it down to read it properly, that the wisdom is sunshine. Greed is icy cold. Wisdom is fresh water. This world foul and cold. In other words, it says that when you get to the spiritual awakening, that's like a sunshine that can melt away the ice, that he uses the ice, the greed that you have. That the spiritual awakening is like a sun that will melt away this greed that is likened to this ice. And the water that can essentially cleanse all this misery and dirt that you fall into when you kept with this mourning. And then he's asking, so what rain was this? Was this similar to the wind that we enjoy as a spring breeze, or was it like a wind that you dread having it in the fall or in the winter? Which one was this? And then it says, if such rain that are hidden should increase, both vice and virtue in this world will cease. In other words, this rain was the spiritual awakening that will help you get rid of all this ill in the world. And now let's go back to the story of the old man.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple of things just to...
We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Hold on a second. Sorry. How about now?
No, same.
Same?
Let me see, hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm full power and I can't hear you.
Okay. How about now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, good.
Well, I can hear you at least. I don't know. I can't speak for others.
So, the misery that you were referring to, do you know what that misery, what does he alludes into as far as, I mean, I don't think if I grasp that, like what is that misery? what misery is he
Staying
healing?
involved with mourning the dead instead of letting go and going and being useful and doing good things to essentially make build the bridge and have something to take with you to the other side.
So the misery that he's talking about is what comes to us as the result of us living in the earth, in the earthly body.
In the earthly body,
I
yeah.
mean, we have, let's say, we lose a friend or a mother or a father. You know, we lose a job. We go through losses or pains and so forth. And these miseries, what Rumi is trying to say is that the miseries that we experience and we go through is something that God is sensitive to it, as well as the misery of the heart and soul. So there's two types of miseries. The one misery that Rumi likes to heal is the misery of him being away from his beloved. But while that is something that he likes to perhaps be healed and kind of get over, there is the other misery that he talks about, which is it comes with the daily life. And as Rasul just said, what happens is that there is, God heals these pains. We come back and in different languages, I'm sure there are expressions about it that it says time will heal everything. Fact of the matter is that the time that we think will heal everything is our perception of our reality, because our reality is so commingled with time and measurement of the days and how the days are passing and what happens today and what comes after tomorrow and so forth. But the reality is that Rumi uh, contributes this to the will of God and says that it's him who understands the misery that you go through and keeps this balance, because you have to have pain and pleasure. And between the balance of this duality of pain and pleasure, you realize who you are and you realize how you can, what are your weaknesses and what are the areas that you would need to grow. And he gives us enough, like it said, from the world gentle sprinkles always pour, so lust and envy here shall live no more. So there's gentle sprinkles that comes through, so it makes all these pains bearable for us. So all of us, if you notice, during the day, you're going out, you're dealing with your professional life. Perhaps you go through arguments, you go through pains, you go through delays, you go through I don't know, lost deals, you go through, hard negotiations. But the funny part is that all of this goes through, and then again, the time comes at around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, you come to a sanctuary place of your own. And this is, something that we think that this is normal, but you really look at it, is that just Rumi sees this as all the purpose of this creation. And this is why it was created this way. And it also refers to, that there is an ayah in the Quran that says that, we created the night for you so you would actually get rest. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, these things, there is a purpose behind all of this. And he is bringing all of that into our foresight. So we better see it that, yeah, there is pain and there is misery that we actually go through, but then there's all these, how can we tolerate all that? Sometimes you look, think about something that happened in your life which was really difficult. Think about it. Perhaps a passing of a parent, a father or a mother. if you were to think through that, hey, you know, what would I do if my dad would pass away? It's always a very, very horrendous thought. And I have seen it for everyone. Everyone who's been around me, no matter what it is, you know, they have lost a parent. And before that has happened, they would always say, oh, this is the most difficult thing. I could probably never live if, for instance, I lose my dad. I would never be able to live if I lose my mom. But the fact of the matter is that that event happens. And once it happens, they go on to the next day. They engage into what has to happen next. And then they engage the next thing and the next thing. And they realize his empty space. And then they move forward. And they start, you know, looking into other things that actually would, you know, commemorate his legacy. Plus, you know, they would kind of start, you know, filling in the gaps with some other things. That is what's happening in our lives. And Rumi is trying to, you know, bring that into our attention, that this is also coming from God. There's a conscious force that looks after us. And, you know, we need to just make sure that we realize that. So having said that, we're still going back to the harp, the old man who plays the harp. And let's see what happens to him afterwards. So it says, that man through whom the world was filled with sound. So now you remember this guy is old at the moment, but apparently he used to have a very beautiful sound, from whose voice grew such visions that astound. So therefore, you know, he had such an astonishing voice that everybody really loved. So bird-like hearts would fly in ecstasy, while souls perplexed would lose stability. As time passed, aged, his falcon soul grown weak, more like a finch that scraps dirt with its beak. So basically, he basically becomes, you know, an ill person. I mean, and the fact that, you know, he can scrap things with his beak, that means that, you know, he started, you know, kind of, he couldn't stand up straight anymore. More like his back became as hunched as jugs of wine. His eyebrows hung down like a trailing vine. His lovely, soul-expanding voice had turned into an ugly, worthless noise men shunned.
Mohsen,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I want to go back to that falcon reference. I understand that this translation, he made it so that it will become fluid and easy to read. But looking at the Farsi version, really, he didn't do justice.
No, he didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So the falcon, what falcon does, as everybody knows, he hunts other birds while they're both on the fly. So essentially, when he's young, he's capable of doing that. He says he's so old now that he can not even grab a fly, let alone a bird.
Right.
That he's that old.
Right. Yeah. So his lovely soul expanding voice had turned into an ugly, worthless noise men shunned. What once made Venus green with jealousy resembled now a mole's beret tragedy. So now he's talking about that, you know, his voice was so powerful that all the way to Venus, it could actually bring, you know, a sort of, you know, a happiness to people who would hear it, or if anybody would hear it. That was the vibration that he could, you know, get out. But now it's so ugly that it could, you know, be, you know, people just don't want to hear it anymore, like a mule's beret. Has any fine thing not turned foul before? Now he's asking us, has any rooftop not become a floor? So again, remember, he's talking about this life. He's talking about earth. He's talking about what happens in this life. Everything in this life is a fine thing at the beginning, but then it actually will age. It will become old. It will, wear out. It's just, that's how it works. It just does. And he is, the rooftops will become floor, meaning the fact that even if you build something, it would eventually crumble. Only the voices of saints from the past, whose breath provides the last day's trumpet blast. So it's like the only thing that stays, the only thing that, would have a lasting effect is the voices that talk through the truth of this universe. And he's, basically comparing that with, the angel, what do you call him?
Esrafil.
Esrafil, yeah, which, basically would, use his trumpet to, voice out or sound out the day that everybody would get resurrected. A soul which makes our heart drunk in an instant, and non-existent which makes us existent. Now he's talking about remember, he talked about the voices that are here for eternity. Now he's saying these voices are coming from souls which are drunk and by the divine wine, and they exist in the non-existence. Remember, we talked about the non-existent or nothingness. It's like they exist there. That's why they are here forever. The loveliness in every voice and thought, the joy which inner revelation brought. When he grew old and weak, that man looked dead. He needed loans just for a loaf of bread. Now he actually comes back to the, story of the harpist. And he says, this guy became old and he couldn't live anymore on, what he used to make. Nobody was willing to listen to him. And he had to get loan. In this case, he had to beg for a loaf of bread. You have granted me long life, Lord, whom I serve, and countless blessings, which I don't deserve. Now, this old guy, he comes to a cemetery. And as he comes to this cemetery, he just decides to pray in his own way. He's talking now. He's talking to God. And he says, you've granted me long life, Lord, whom I serve, and countless blessings which I don't deserve. For 70 years, although I sinned each day, you never would withhold grace from my way. Think about that. He's saying that he sinned every day for 70 years. Is that a true statement?
I compare it with mine, it's only 5 years extra. Otherwise, yes.
Okay. So how do you define?
He's wondering why was he being provided for even though he was sinning?
Let me ask you this. First of all, what is the sin?
Not obeying what the Almighty sets out for you to do, or going against what Almighty sets out for you.
Give me an example of a sin.
Not feeding the hungry when you can.
Did you? Are you? Did you feed the hungry today, Rasul?
No, I didn't.
So
I sinned. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't either. So.
or clothe the people who need to be clothed.
But hold on a second. This is not something. I mean, let's go back to perhaps what's in the Quran. What is a sin in the Quran? Oh, come on.
I mean, a lot of us, anything that there's no way any of us.
What is a sin? Come on, Mr. Mohsen. You study the Quran. You have a Quranic class.
Sin, as Rasul said.
Give me one sin.
Lying.
Okay, lying. Did any of you lie today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you sinned.
Yes.
Okay. I lied too. So I sinned. All right. So
but that's why before I go to bed, I say 20 times, Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu alayh, to cleanse my soul for
so
next
you
morning.
balance it out. Okay.
Yes.
What is sinning? Seriously, what is sinning? I mean, we're not thinking through that enough. As far as even, what is a sin? Like, let's say today somebody asked me, what did you have for lunch? And I had chicken, but I told them I had salad. Why? Because at that time, I really didn't feel like I wanted to say that I only had a piece of chicken, without anything else. I didn't feel like explaining myself. But technically, I lied.
But we are told that that's not a sin.
It is a sin. Hold on a second. If I'm not telling the truth, I'm lying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the truth is lying.
So in my opinion,
not all lies are created equally.
My opinion is that it's about niyyah. Innama al-amalu bin-niyyat.
It's about your niyyah. Okay.
Right. So for instance, when you said I had salad instead of chicken, if your niyyah was, for instance, the person you were talking to couldn't afford chicken. So you didn't want them to feel bad that they can't afford chicken. You didn't want to sound like you're showing off that you had chicken. To me, it's about intention. Same thing can be sin. Same thing can be a very good deed, depending on our intention. That's how I look at things.
Okay. So I have news for you.
Sir.
So technically, like for instance, sometimes, it's just like, I think this is like, it goes back into how a judge would, take the rule of law. Okay. Let's just say that, you didn't pay taxes on something that you should have. And you're like, but Your Honor, I didn't have an intention to deceive the government. I just overlooked it. But what he says is that, well, you had to pay taxes, you didn't, therefore here's your penalty. So what I'm trying to say is this. The whole point of rationalizing, and we all do, we rationalize stuff, that I didn't mean this, I sinned, but this was not, I wasn't intended to deceive anyone. I just didn't want to explain anything. And that ration would just allow me to go forward. The reason I bring this up is because all of us kind of, if you have to look at it, Rumi is trying to tell us something here when he says, for 70 years, although I sinned each day, you never would withhold grace from my way. The part that I really want to emphasize on is actually not the fact that whether I sinned or I didn't sin today. That is completely personal to every single one of us. But the parts that I think we should be consciously aware of, the fact that there was so much blessing in our lives today, only just today, from the moment we got up, we brushed our teeth, we were able to go to the bathroom, we were able to shower, we were able to have coffee, we put clothes on, we had lunch, we had, drinks, all that. This is where Rumi wants us to look at. So rather than counting the number of sins that I may have done in a day, let's try to figure out how many times can we thank for the blessings that we had, because that is countless. You say 20 astaghfirullah. How many, alhamdulillah do you have to say?
Many more.
So this is why now all of a sudden, like I said, I told you guys, and I know you guys have one of these. This is starting to make sense now. That if I have to say alhamdulillah 100 times, it actually starts making sense why I have to do that. See, it's interesting. In business today, there are people who write books about, hey, understand your why. And the fact of the matter is that we have to understand our why when it comes down to our life. I mean, how do we live? This is living. I don't care how many times you sinned, but how many times did you realize consciously how much blessing you were given without you asking for it? Let's not talk about the ones that you did ask and you got them. So this is why Rumi brings this up. He says, for 70 years, although I sinned each day, you never would withhold grace from my way. Without means, I'm your guest. So hear my song. I play for God's sake, to whom I belong. How many times in a day are we willing to do something only and only for God's sake?
But this old man is not doing it for God's sake to start with. He says, without means, I'm your guest. He says, nobody's feeding me, nobody's giving me any money, so I'm going to be relying on you. I'm going to go and talk to you and get it from you.
So that's for God's sake. As a matter of fact, you're absolutely correct. He realizes that nobody else is feeding him.
Yeah.
So guess where he's coming?
He says, I'm going to come and play for you and you're going to pay me.
So therefore, here's the deal. How many times, again, I ask, for God's sake, we did something?
Yeah.
He picked his harp up, sought God on his own, crying inside the graveyard all alone. I seek from God the cost of just one string. He'll kindly take the counterfeits I bring. Now, this is a bad translation about cost of one string. Now, first of all, he's completely mistaken the expression. When they wanted to tip, musicians in the past, they would tip him for what they called a cost of a string, or a cost of a very fine material. So that's what it was. So either they would pay him for the cost of a silk, or they would pay him for cost of a string. And cost of a string would be like, hey, if you're going to tip me for this. So he's like, now I'm going to play, and I want you to give me that. He'll kindly take the counterfeits I bring. And he's like, people would give him so normally, of course, it's like as if you've been to 3rd Street Promenade here in Los Angeles, there used to be times that, musicians would come and, do something, and then they had somebody going around with bucket to actually throw money in it and so forth. And sometimes people will just, throw a dime or a couple of pennies, or people would throw in $1 or $10 or whatever. And perhaps some people would throw in something which was a fake money. And back then there was more counterfeits than today's. And it's like, no matter how many counterfeits I get, I can bring it to him and he'll take it. God will take counterfeits too. God will exchange that for us. So that's why he says he'll kind of take the counterfeits I bring. When he had played a long time and thus wept, so he keeps playing for a long time and keeps on crying. With harp as pillow, grave as bed, he slept. So he finally got tired and he goes to sleep.
He goes to sleep on a gravestone and put the harp as a pillow.
Inside the grave, yeah. So his spirit fled the prison of his breast, abandoning the harp now for its quest. So now Rumi is again trying to tell us that our spirit is where our freedom, I mean, when we allow our spirit to leave our body, that's where they actually are free to go. And that's, remember, we talked about the subconscious and the consciousness. And the subconscious now is, when we're sleeping, our subconscious is engaged quite a bit. So his spirit fled the prison of his breast, abandoning the harp now for its quest, free from the body and this world of pain, into the simple world, the soul's domain. And Rumi also gives us this expression or tells us this, this is very simple reasoning. He says, pain is for the body, it's not for the soul. Soul does not have any pain. When the soul leaves us, you don't feel pain in the soul. The pain that you feel is always associated with the body. So free from the body and this world of pain. And remember, this world of pain is what gives us, that ability to understand anything that goes between the pain and pleasure. Between the pain and pleasure, we understand, we manifest things in, around us so that we can understand how things are made or how things are basically performing for us. His soul, his soul sang of what he had now come upon. If I could only stay here from now on. So obviously his soul goes to its own origin and he realizes how beautiful where the soul is going to or returning to is. And that's when he starts asking questions that, could I just stay here from now on? Why? Because he all of a sudden figured out that he was free from all of his needs and all of his pain, and he was able to experience something without needs and pain. I'd love to stay in vernal realms instead, inside this mystic plane and tulip bed. I'd crawl here now without a head or feet, without a lip or teeth. It's sweet, I'd eat. With thoughts free of affliction from the brain, I'd joke with those up there in heaven's plane. Up there with eyes closed, a whole world I'd view. Without a hand, I'd pick some roses too. So all of a sudden, he's experiencing what is possible without what he thought he needed in order to make those things possible. We always think that we have to pick flowers with our hands. But Rumi is trying to tell us that this is just us and this is our imagination and our view in this world, that we think that if we don't have hands, we cannot pick a flower. We think if we don't have a rose, we cannot smell the rose. I'm sorry, if we don't have a nose. So Rumi has been telling us that all of this, that we think that we need all of these five senses in order to be able to do what we do, is a hoax. And the hoax is that this is something that we're seeing because we have been basically caged in this manifested world, which runs on duality. And because of duality, we're able to see what is possible and what's not possible. And we are given the brain and this self or ego, which together they make us, or they prevent us to experience anything beyond. Okay, so up there with eyes closed, a whole world out view, without a hand I'd pick some roses too. The birds which in a sea of honey sink, Job's fount, Job's fount, which cleanses and serves as a drink. And in this case, this is he's talking about Jacob, right?
Ayub.
I know that's Jacob.
Ayub.
I know.
It's Job. Job is Ayub.
Isn't that Jacob?
No, Jacob is no. Job is. This is the Job is.
Jacob is Yahoo.
Yahoo.
Okay, never mind.
Job is Ayub.
Right. So Job. So it's the prophet. Yeah, and in this case, he's talking about Job's fount, which cleanses and serves as a drink. One of the miracles of Job was the fact that underneath his feet there was a little river started, and the water he was able to both cleanse himself in it, and he was able to drink from it. That's why he's bringing the fact that he realized that is actually possible. It's here. I can see it. Okay.
Muslim,
Yes.
can I give you a quick 5 minute on Job?
Sure.
So Job is
5
known
minutes is
for
too much. Make it 1 minute.
No. Just quickly, Job is known for his patience.
Mm-hmm.
Sabr Ayub is very common in Farsi, and Job's patience is very common in English. So what happened was God was testing him. He had everything you can imagine. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters, beautiful wives, 700 head of sheep and whatnot, and everything he had. And everything all of a sudden was taken from him. He did not lose patience, and he did not give up on God. He didn't start yelling and screaming and cursing. So then he became very sick. So when he was very sick, it came to him to kick your feet. And on one kick, water started running that he cleansed himself with. And then he said, now kick your other feet. And something similar to honey started flowing that he drank, and he made him well.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's what that's all about.
Very nice. So that's why he says, I cleansed Job from his head down to his toe, like
Right.
Downs, first light from all his earthly woes.
Right.
So basically, through what was taken from him and the way he experienced that and the way he patiently surrendered to the will of God and didn't lose his faith, he was able to get something that was eternal and unlimited. Now he says, if this book matched the sky's expansiveness, it still could not contain the drop of this.
This is Rumi talking now.
Yes, he's talking about Masnavi itself. In a sense, he's trying to say that if Masnavi was, if I had the entire sky to write about this thing would not have finished. And what he's talking about as far as writing about it is talking about writing about this experience, this out-of-body experience, the experience that the soul will have, he says this would not be over. The earth and sky, vast space, has sliced my heart with feelings of confinement. I locked apart. And in this case, is like what I have in this world is so limited that it just turns me into pieces, as far as that I can't do what I want to do. There's so much that I want to tell. That dream world, which I have seen with my own eyes. Now again, Rumi is talking about himself. The dream world, or that dream world, which I have seen with my own eyes, through its expansiveness, spurs me to fly. So he's like, whatever I have seen in my dreams, it is, and Rumi believes, in this case, he believes in his dreams. And I want to tell you guys something about this thing, as from a perspective of the quality of the dreams that we were having. Only until you get to a level that you can free yourself from the thoughts that are bringing you down and cleansing your inner soul and your experience. That is only if you can do that, that's when you can actually start dreaming the way Rumi is dreaming. And the reason I say this is you have to understand, there are studies done about this. That, for instance, this is why they say, like, at night, before you go to bed, try to meditate. Before you go to bed, try to, perhaps they say, not see something that is, making your mind too engaged. Because somewhere I read that it takes about 4 hours for your conscious mind to finally fall into sleep. That is, if you have a continuous 8-hour sleep. So it takes 4 hours for your conscious mind to finally, fall into sleep. Problem is that the conscious mind, the longer it takes for it to go to sleep, the more effect it would have on your subconscious. And your subconscious is where you start dreaming, like the way that Rumi's been explaining it here. All of this stuff, you actually see it with your subconscious.
That's why most dreams come early in the morning, because you're already finished with your deep sleep.
That's because exactly your mind has already basically gone into sleep, and your subconscious is actually working. That's why they say early morning dreams are the dreams that you should count on, or you should perhaps look into what they really meant. So all of this stuff is something that I think all of us need to take into account and think through it. As you're, for instance, going to bed, take that seriously. Take that with a very serious, and think about it. Look at, for those of you who have children, you read to them perhaps when they're about to go to bed, or you kind of, it's interesting, when you put them to bed and they're tired, they just go. And the reason they go is because their mind is not too occupied with anything. So that allows them to just go. And, I'm sure that they actually have, pleasant dreams. In our cases, again, our whole day has been occupied with everything painful or pleasure-like that we had to experience. The number of phone calls you make, the number of conversations you have. This is why, now I understand why you have to pray 5 times a day. The reason is, it tries to give you enough interruption in the day. And of course, none of us, I don't think, if we take that seriously. We're like, okay, let's just get the prayer done. I have to get back to work. The fact of the matter is that you have to finish work so you get to prayer. But again, the time that we need to take in order to do the prayer is important, because and you have to be present for it.
Actually,
And
we line up the word when we are praying.
exactly. So, you know, BlackBerry goes off and you hear the text and you hear this and you hear that. This is, again, I mean, think about it. This is designed in order to give us those interruptions that are needed so that we can actually be better.
Mohsen,
Yes.
have you seen or heard or used the analogy of time management to a three-legged stool?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I think this is perfect time. I hope you indulge me that I can tell you, I wish I had learned about this 20 years before I did.
Okay.
And you'll see in a minute why. So the life resembles a three-legged stool cannot stand on anything but three legs. It needs all three legs to stand on. And these three legs, I say they are faith, family, and fortune. Faith, your whatever your religious belief is that you're exercising. Family, of course, family, and fortune is your work. And if any one of these get weak to the point of breakage, your life will fall apart. So you need to nourish all three legs, not necessarily equally, but to the extent that you don't let any one of them break. So really, this God Almighty is the great philosopher of all time for us to put the prayer right smack in the middle of the day to force us to break from work, to actually leave work and go pray, essentially to strengthen all three legs of this stool.
So nice. Yeah. I don't know how many of you guys actually to that point. So I've never been a fan of Microsoft Outlook, but every company that I've gone to, you know, that's what they are using. So I'm using the same thing. And there is a intelligent, supposedly there is something called Cortana or something, which is, you know, early in the morning, it sends me an email. And it says in there, here are your meetings. Here are some material that you need. I mean, it's pretty impressive, actually. I like it. So there's like some of the material that's related to these meetings is here. So if you want to review them again, and then it comes back and says, these are areas that you can have your focus time. And I know when I read about this, you know, you can actually insert prayer time in there as well. And it will schedule it for you. You actually have to just tell it that this is what I want, and it will just build it into your day. So after all of this, the technologists figured out that, yeah, we need that break or else we can't sustain it.
Yeah.
Having said that, I mean, the more I think about this, unfortunately, because of bad practices of our religion in different parts of the world, people are looking at it as something that's completely backward, whereas it's actually so forward. It is a forward-looking thing. You have to do this, because unless you do it, you can't live properly. So getting back to the dream part, he's now talking about that. And he says, that dream world, which I've seen with my own eye, through its expansiveness spurs me to fly. If that world and its gates were manifest, then few would stay here for a moment's rest. So he's like, if people only knew what that world looks like, nobody would have wanted to stay here. But a lot of people don't know what that is. A lot of people think that is all just some obscure thinking. And that's why nobody really looks at, you know, the experience of being alive and conscious with, you know, becoming one with God as living. They think, you know, you're being too I don't know, you're being religious or you're being dogmatic or you're being, backwards. But the reality is that no, I mean, the world is catching up to what was said, let's say 800 years ago or 1400 years ago. So he says, then the command came, don't be greedy, no. Well, in this case now, he's saying, of course, the fact that I wanted to stay, and in this case, this is the old guy, he was seeing some of this. And he's like, I want to stick around. I really don't want to go back there. He says, no, the command says, no, you got to go. Now that the thrones come out, now that the thorns come out, step forward and go. So it's like the fact of the matter is that because the thorns have come out of your eyes, and in this case, not the eyes that you see with your, eyesight, the eyes of your heart, the divine eye, is like now that thorn has come out, go ahead and go forward. You can now live different. The harpist spirit lingered.
Reticent.
Reticent. Sorry, I don't know what that word is. Clung tightly to the most beneficent or beneficent. So in this case, he's like, yeah, the guy, waited a little bit, but then finally he's like, okay, I gotta go. And the experience that he had was, he realized the most merciful or beneficent, who was it and how it is in this case, which, every day we also say this when we're talking, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is in the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent, the merciful, or something like that. Am I correct? That's how it's translated. Okay. All right. Now, the story of the harpist continues. So while he was asleep, a voice told Omar, give this much gold from the treasury to that man who is sleeping in the graveyard. Now the harpist is asleep, and let's see what it says. Omar was then made drowsy for God's sake until he could no longer stay awake. So in this case, Omar, it's in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden he feels that he wants to sleep. And, he basically falls asleep. He felt amazed and said, this is no game. It came from the unseen. It serves an aim. He lay down, slept, and had a dream so clear that God's own voice, Omar's soul, then could hear. The voice is the sole source of every sound. All noise is just its echo going around. So in this case, basically what he's saying is that everything else that we see or we hear is an echo, but the soul, what it hears, is actually the truth and the true sound. So each Nubian, Persian, Arab, Turk, and Kurd, without their ears, this wondrous voice has heard. And it's true. The fact of the matter is that right now we are communicating through the language of English language. And some of us speak, Urdu, and some of us speak Farsi and perhaps other languages and all that. But the fact of the matter is that these are just the languages that we use to connect as a alive body, because there is a mind. We have to learn how to speak. We have to learn how to enunciate words. We have to learn how to pronounce them. We have to learn grammar. We have to learn, pronunciation, things like that. But what he's saying is that the divine voice reaches everyone, irrespective of who they are and what language they speak. They all hear it. So that's why he's again going back to the fact that in the retrospect of the grand scheme of things, all of us are coming from the same place because all of us hear the same thing. Our echoes are different. but the inner voice is the same. When your inner voice is thankful, the feeling of thankfulness for every single one of us is the same. When you feel at peace, the feeling of peace for all of us is the same. Same thing when we actually feel rage. We express them differently. When you feel loved, all of us feel the same way. The only thing is we perhaps may, say it differently in different languages. So the reason we all hear it the same way is because we're all coming from the same place. Okay. So what if Turks and Tajiks understood? The voice is heard as well by stone and wood. Now, Rumi decides that he's going to now kind of go into a different level. He's like, all right, not only you guys with different background and languages understand, guess what? Even the stone and wood also understand it. And that is something that, by the way, in recent years, has been discovered by, the new physicists and all that, and the string theories and all that. And they, realize that everything in this world has a consciousness which makes them vibrate. So everything that we see has a vibration associated with it. You may have heard this. If you listen to, talks of somebody like Esther Hicks and those guys, they talk about vibrations a lot. When you meet somebody, you feel good about them, and you meet somebody else and you feel bad about them. You haven't spoken a word, but what you get is their vibration and your vibration. If they're aligned, you feel good. And if they're not aligned, you're like, I don't like this guy. You can't explain it. But what it is that your vibration is in conflict with that other person's vibration. It's not aligned. It's funny, people, they get into relationships with people who are not in the same level of vibration with them. And they wonder how come they never can make this work. This is why it's so important for us to self-realize. This is why it's so important to realize our soul, our inner soul. What am I all about? How am I built? How do I look at life? How do I view this world? This is why then, if people are not viewing the world the same as you are, you have a hard time connecting with them because your vibration and their vibration is different. So he says, each moment, am I not your Lord, we hear, and essences and accidents appear. So, am I not your Lord? It's the ayah that we have talked about it. It's the Surah A'raf, ayah 172, or the verse 172, which basically, it's, God asking, am I not your Lord? And we say, Qalu bala, we say, yes, you are. And he's saying that what you have to understand is that your soul has said yes. You have to realize that within you. Our self, our ego has to allow us to realize what's inside. That's why the ego needs to go away, because the ego is completely shielded us from realizing our inner self or our inner God. If we don't understand our inner self, we cannot understand our inner God. So each moment, am I not your Lord, we hear, and essences and accidents appear. And in this case, it's not essences and accidents. It's about the essence and the reasons behind them. and the reasons of seeing things. Though all don't cry out yes, still their emergence is like a yes sprung forth from non-existence. So it's like some of these things, like this mug, believe it or not, this mug also talks. And right now, somebody would probably think that I'm like consuming some hallucination drug or something like that. I haven't taken mushrooms or anything. But the reality is that, yes, it does talk. I don't hear it, you don't hear it, but it does say stuff. And by the way, it says it without reservation. We say it with reservation because we have an ego that sometimes prevents us. Or if you can't see God, it doesn't exist. If you can't see your spirit, how could you know that their spirit exists? Have you heard that? When you say like, we are all, there is a spirit within us. I'm like, well, I can't see it. I was reading a book and it says in there, this was the best thing that I heard. It's like, the guy was talking to a neurosurgeon, and the neurosurgeon is like, I've cut into a lot of brains and I've never seen a spirit. And it's like, and he's like, I asked him, when you actually cut into those brains, did you see the thoughts too? Were you able to see the thoughts? The thoughts exist. But were you able to see it? If you didn't see them, then why do you say that they exist? It's interesting. There's very simple questions that sometimes we can ask to get people to think through stuff. So though all don't cry out yes, still their emergence is like a yes sprung forth from non-existence. I said that stone and wood can understand. This tale will illustrate this and expand. So now, since he said that stone and wood can understand, he wants to tell us another story. So let's go and see what this story is. So this story in, Farsi, it's called Ostone Hannane. Oston is called, is like a pillar. And Hannane is the word that we use for somebody who is sad and he's crying out. And in this case, this is related to in the old days, they would make pillars when they were building something out of palm trees. In the days that, of course, in the old days where there was no real iron that they could actually put up as foundation and things like that. And apparently the story is like in the first mosque that the Prophet built in Medina, there was a piece of wood that he would lean against and recite his khutbah or the Friday prayers. And after a while, people built him a, I don't know what's the word for mambar.
Pulpit.
I'm sorry?
Pulpit.
What?
Pulpit.
Pulpit, okay. Something that he could go on and, you've seen it, people go on top of it and they can see everyone else and so forth. So a pulpit. So they build one for him. And what happens is the Prophet hears that pillar moaning. And apparently the Prophet and the pillar have a conversation, according to Rumi. So let's see what that is. So the complaint
They built that pulpit from the tree that he was leaning against. They used that to build the pulpit.
No.
No?
No. They built it from a different. 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 No. They built it just you'll see it right now. It's
Okay.
very quick. So a complaint of a moaning pillar when a pulpit was made from the prophet for the prophet, because the congregation had grown and they had said, we can't see your blessed face when you are preaching. The prophet and his companions hear the pillars complain, and the prophet converses with it plainly. A pillar cut off from the prophet moaned, just like a living being, and it groaned. He asked it, what are you reacting to? My soul bleeds now that it's cut off from you. This is the pillar talking to the prophet. The pillar says that my soul is bleeding. I was your firm support, but you have moved on. Do pulpits have a post to lean upon? So he's now trying to compare himself to this fancy, pulpit that's there, and says, like, does it have something that you could lean on? Because that was the only thing that he was providing. Do you want to be, so prophet asks him, do you want to be made a palm instead? Do you want me to make you a living tree? So everyone can pick your dates, he said. Or that God should make you a cypress tree, so you'll stay fresh and moist eternally. It's like, what do you want? I can make your God make you anything that you want. The pillar said, I want what lasts forever. Don't you behave worse than this piece of timber. This last part is to us.
Yeah.
So it's like, if they ask us, we're going to say, oh yeah, give me the eternal cup and I want to live forever. I guarantee you, you offer this to 99.9% of population, they'll say, yep, I'll take the eternal cup. I want to live. But living that we think, or our mind is thinking and our ego understands, is the living that's associated with this life. Your heart and soul looks at living as catching up and being in the non-existence. So it says, the pillar said, I want what lasts forever. And what lasts forever is when your soul is free from everything that bounds it to earth. So in this case, what he wants is he wants to be free out of this wood. He buried that pillar. He buried then that pillar so it may be resurrected on the final day. So the prophet decided that he's going to bury that pillar. Once he buried the pillar was able to, the soul, this is a sign, when we bury the body, the soul leaves. The soul is free. And that is when they last forever. Now he's like, don't you behave worse than this piece of timber. So those men who God has called.
I'm sorry, but that tree was not being greedy for this world. When he says, I want last forever. Or was he?
I didn't understand the first part of your question, sorry.
When the pillar says, I want last forever, is the tree requesting to be, to achieve union, or something worldly?
Yeah, hold on. Did we talk about the different levels of our soul? different levels that the soul goes through. So we start from the level of timbers and trees. And then we elevate into being animals. And then from that, we elevate into being a human. And then from that, we elevate into being an angel. And then from that, we elevate into being, into God's men, perhaps, if that's the right word for it, prophets, and as such. So Rumi is, kind of pointing to that this timber, this piece of timber, still has a soul. And this soul wanted to actually be freed, or it wanted to elevate. So he's like, help me get out of this. Mm-hmm. And the prophet buried it so that it would elevate to its next level quicker. Within us, in our, we talked about that whole muto qabla an tamuto, the words from Imam Ali, which said that, die before you die. And the death that he's talking about is the death of your ego. He's like, you need to keep killing yourself. You need to kill the self, get rid of this self so that you can elevate. So this is, basically pointing to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So those men whom God has called you, as you should know, involvement with this world, choose to forgo. So it's like the men of God are the ones who have completely forgoed their involvement with this world, transforming a piece of wood to be a, what was it called? To be a pulpit is transforming the form, not the essence. So he didn't want to be transformed into another form. He didn't want to be another tree anymore. He wanted to be better than that. We sometimes want to be another person. Oh, can I just be like this person? Whereas we need to start looking at where is our self now and where is our higher self, and can I be like my higher self, or can I achieve my higher self? This is what Rumi is trying to tell us in here. Those men whom God has called, as you should know, involvement with this world choose to forgo. Forever gets work straight from God and will find, forever gets work straight from God, will find admission there and leave his job behind. Now, in this case, what he's saying is that they lose interest in what we believe is the daily life here. Once they get admitted into that other world, and once they get admitted into that, they don't want to have anything to do with this world. We are bounded. Remember, we're bounded here by our needs. We are bounded here by what our ego makes us feel. How many times have you guys heard that when you get up in the morning, you should get up and smile? Countless times you guys have heard this. People say, when you get up, be energetic, listen to music, picture yourself at peak performance. Those of you who have gone to, Tony Robbins speeches and all that. These are all great stuff. But why do they say that? Well, because the moment you actually put yourself at that level, you're elevating your soul. How many of us do that Very little, very few. And the problem is that our needs bring us down to that level. Our needs start telling us that if you do this, this is not going to be anything sustainable for your life. You have to get out of the house and do, chase after that money that you had to actually go get. Well, that's fine. You can do that, but do it at your peak performance. Do it with the higher self. Do it with a higher energy, because that vibration can be viral. Once somebody else is having a higher vibration, they would be more receptive to you. Those of you who probably have heard, read these books as far as how do we influence another person. The very first thing that you have to do about influencing another person is put yourself at a higher self. So, those men whom God has called, as you should know, involvement with this world choose to forego. Whoever gets work straight from God will find admission there and leave his job behind. But those who've not had gifts from realms unknown will not believe inanimates can moan. So in this case, the people who are completely disconnected from what is beyond, with their subconscious, with their with the higher self, they also come back and say there is no way that a piece of wood can talk. There is just no way that a piece of wood would have consciousness. He says yes, though inside he scoffs at it. So you won't say that he is a hypocrite. It's like some people, it would even go along with it if you actually tell them that, there's consciousness in a piece of wood or something like that. It's like, yeah, somebody might just shake their head and say, yeah, that is it, because they don't want you to think like, they're a non-believer, or they don't even want to go through the admission of what they don't believe in. 1,000 men who just obey, that's told, were filled with doubt when one new thought took hold. So it's like what happens is that men, and in this case 1,000 men is talking about masses. Masses are like this. They just obey what they're told. People are like to be told what to do. Believe in God? Do you believe in God? Yes. Okay, I believe in God too. It's like this is how life has been. 1,000 men who just obey what's told. They would never search for it. Their skills in logic, proofs, and in imitation are based upon their false imagination. That wretched Satan sows doubt in each mind. So the fact of the matter is that, first of all, they never search. They never want to find why we say, or he is saying that, a piece of wood could have consciousness. They never even want to go, even give it a little bit of thought. So what happens is they believe in masses, because the crowd feeds off of each other and gives each other energy. Another thing that also happens here is the fact that they also have doubt, and that doubt has been instilled in their hearts that such thing is even possible. So once they have that doubt instilled in them, they would never ask anything, other than what the rest of the crowd would believe. So that wretch Satan sows doubt in each mind in order to trip up the ones who are blind. The legs of theorists are made of wood, a wooden leg's unstable, and it's no good. So he calls them theorists or philosophers. And it says these people are like people who are standing on a piece of wood. Their legs are made out of wood. And it's like a wooden leg is an unstable leg. You can easily break it. And he calls the masses that. Theorists who are standing on wooden, unstable legs. The pole of each age is a visionary. Mountains feel dizzy at his constancy. So he's like, there is always somebody who comes as a pole, as a, you know, a way to look at. And he brings in that vision that people can actually start looking into somewhere different. While blind men need a stick to walk around, to stop them tumbling over the ground. That horseman through whom armies won their fight, who is this man? The one who has true sight. So in this case, he's saying that we are the blind men and we need sticks to walk around. These sticks is, you know, what is a stick in our analogy? We are blind. He's establishing that. And we need a stick to walk around. So what is the stick that we're given so that we could walk around? Martin.
Our reliance on sort of worldly things, or our
What
world.
does the stick resemble? What does a blind man do?
He feels around with the stick
How does he do it?
with his hand. I mean, like our senses are basically like that stick.
So have you seen a blind man walk?
Yeah, they kind of feel around the ground. They don't.
How do they feel around? They hit once, then they hit another one, right? Tap, tap, tap,
Yeah.
right? What is that?
What is what?
What is the analogy of this stick?
Those are the senses.
What is the analogy of this stick? You're a computer man.
I mean, I think the stick is their antenna. It's their senses.
It's their mind.
Yeah, the mind. Okay.
And your mind works with top, 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 top.
With the
True
sense.
or false?
With your what?
With true or false? Yes, no.
Yeah.
True, false.
Binary.
Binary, exactly. 0, 1.
Yeah.
This is exactly how he's describing it right now. He says the blind man needs a stick. The blind man is us. In order for us to walk, we need a stick. Right now, even we need a stick. In order for us to understand or see something, in order for you to read the text that you're seeing right now, you need a background that's white and a font color that's black. That contrast allows you to read. So you need the stick because that's how your mind operates. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now he's talking about, the fact that, all right, who is the horseman who's been, at least leading people forward? And he's like, this is the guy who actually has true vision. And the person who has true vision is not relying on his mind. He's not relying on the binary. Though with a stick, the blind can walk with ease, seeing through help received from visionaries. So he's like, although a blind man can get so far with his stick, and again, although we get so far with our stick, which is our mind, we still need visionaries to show us the path. And these visionaries are people like the prophets, people like Rumi, who can actually show us something that we can actually start seeing the better of ourselves, the higher self. So though with stick the blind can walk with ease, seeing through help received from visionaries. If there were no king, if there were no kings of the mystic kind, as stiff as corpse, you would see the blind. It's like if there wasn't these visionaries, the blinds were, in this case, he's talking about, they were stiff as dead. That means that, the blind couldn't get anywhere. They couldn't even get past their own front yard. So sowing and reaping, blind men cannot do, nor trade, nor building, as is plain to you. So he's like now trying to give us a sense of exactly what it really means to be blind. He's like, okay, a blind man can never rip something or can never sew something. Give him a piece of thing that he needs to rip precisely to the dimension that you want. He can never do it. And tell him now to sew it back. He can never sew it. It's really difficult. So it's like you can't create. That's what he's trying to say. When you're blind, and you're blind always with your ego and your mind, they blind you. They instill doubt, and that blinds you. So it's like sowing and reaping blind men cannot do, nor trade, nor building, as is plain to you. If he had not shown mercy to your heart, your staff of reason would have split apart. It's like God has shown you mercy. That's why you're living. Or else you would completely be torn apart because you're blind. What is this stuff? Now he's asking, what is this? What is this staff? In this case, he's talking, what is this stick? Proofs and analogies. In our mind, we always want proof. Show me there is a God. Show me there is a soul. Show me 2 + 2 is 4. What is this staff? Proofs and analogies. Who gave it? The most glorious one who sees. Who gave it to you? God. God gave us this staff, or God gave us this stick or cane to walk with. This should be a cane rather than staff, by the way, or a stick. The canes become a weapon for your hate. So break it into bits, you blind ingrate. This is so powerful, this line. People use what they believe out of their proofs and analogies to hate each other. This cane became a weapon for your hate. So now you took this pain, this cane that you have, and you are beating another person with it. So break it into bits. That's exactly when you have to break it and put it aside. This was not meant for you to beat each other. He gave this cane that you might benefit. In anger, has he struck you once with it? And this is a bad translation, because the real translation is like, he gave you this cane so that you could benefit in life, but you take this cane and beat him with it too. Yes, we beat God with the cane that he gave us, because we come back and prove in 1,000 ways that he does not exist. Go read books. You just type in Google about books that proves that there is no God. See how many titles comes through. These are people who are using this cane to prove that he's not there. Blind people, that's us. Blind people. What's kept you preoccupied? Look for an intermediary, a guide. Don't disobey. He gave the cane to you. Remember just what Adam was put through? He gave it to you so that you could do something with it. You could do good with it. The miracles of Moses and Muhammad, a stick became a snake, a pillar muttered. So in this case, he's talking about this whole notion of these canes or sticks that we have read. We think through the miracle of, what happened with Moses and the Pharaoh, and how his cane transforms into a snake. And he looks at it differently. Look how he is looking at it and how we look at it. We look at it as if it was Charlton Heston who played that, that movie, and everybody just remembers that. But what he sees is that, no, what that means is that cane does have consciousness, and it transforms, and it's listening to a higher power, not you. That's how he's looking at it. But if this truth were comprehensible, we wouldn't need a single miracle. If anybody could understood this, we didn't need these type of miracles. The pillar I'm sorry, I missed this line. He says, the pillar moaned, the stick turned to a snake. They strike 5 times a day for their faith's sake. He's like, 5 times a day, you go to pray so that you manifest and realize the secret that is in this transformation. How does this transformation help you? What does it mean to you? That which is grasped by your intelligence does not need miracles as evidence. If you did have intelligence, you didn't need miracles. Consider this path. It's irrational. It's like, what I'm asking, I know it's not a rational thing. It's irrational. And yet to wise men, it's acceptable. Because they don't need a ration. They need to feel it here in their heart. While demons, fearing Adam, chose to flee to far-off islands filled with jealousy. Likewise, when prophets' miracle appear, the skeptics hide their heads in sand through fear, so they can act like Muslims in deceit without you knowing that they only cheat. Majority of people just want to act. They're cheating it their way through it. They rub on silver fake insignias to make them real. They're worthless replicas. They falsely speak of laws, God's unity, like loaves which they hide with impurity. Philosophers don't dare to breathe a word because true faith will show them they're absurd. Now, all of this stuff, none of them is, philosophers cannot even get near it because they can't explain it, because their stick doesn't reach that far. It doesn't get it. They don't realize they have to get rid of it. He's like, remember, this is a tool. A tool is meant to be, look at it in this lifetime. You buy a tool. A tool has a lifetime. Then eventually it's done. You're done with it. Another tool you have to go and acquire. It's like, but you stick with what you think it makes sense, because you're afraid of letting it go. Their hands and feet do what their spirits say, since they're inanimate and must obey. So the people who are the philosophers, Is like, in this case, what happens is eventually their hands and feet are going to testify. And basically they're like, this is, we weren't able to do anything different because he wanted us to do this. Although they spread doubts and they falsify, against them their own limbs will testify. Although philosophers, and you can see how he hates philosophers. He thinks that they are the ones who actually bring all these doubts to people because they engage the mind, and Rumi is trying to engage the heart. He doesn't believe in engaging the mind anymore because we have already come so far. We have already used our cane to come forward. It's like, now it's your time to actually leave it aside and start using different tools. But again, your mind wouldn't let you. And it's like, eventually, there is a day that, your limbs will testify and they'll say, yeah, he still wouldn't let go. Okay. This is a very small story. I'm going to read this one too. We got a little bit of time. He's now given a story about Abu Jahl. This is an encounter that the Prophet Muhammad had with Abu Jahl. In this case, he's, again, the point of the story is to give us a way to think through consciousness. So it says, while holding gravel, Abu Jahl came near to ask the Prophet, what do I have here? If you're a prophet, tell me what I have brought. Since heaven's secret, you must have been taught. So it's like, you're a special guy, so tell me, how many gravel do I have? Prophet says, would you prefer it if I answer you, or if the stones speak up and tell that what's true? So what do you want? Do you want me to tell you, or do you want them to tell you? He said, the latter, more incredible. Of course, true of much of God's more, of course, though of much more God's capable. Within his fist, each stone began to say that he had Muslim faith without delay. And in this case, what the stones say is that they said, basically, La ilaha illallah, or there is no God but God. Each said there is no God except Allah, and joined Muhammad in his and joined Muhammad as his messenger. On hearing this, he threw them on the floor, much angrier than he had been before. I'm not going to say we should believe this. I'm not going to say we should deny it. I think there is truth in it. I think it makes sense, at least to me. If I was able to figure this out for myself and try to tap into this unlimited power, I probably would have been different places. But this exists. This is the truth. This is what exists beyond every other means that we may think through it. This is something that we cannot think through it. This is why we think it doesn't exist. This is why we think it doesn't happen.
And I believe he wants to also show one more fact, that the person who is not open to see, even if the stone talks, he just get mad and walk away. He just doesn't have that heart, open heart to basically hear and see and accept.
Yeah. Okay. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Khasta nabash.
Thank you. It was good tonight.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a
I'll
see
see
you
you
next week.
guys next week.